Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 52. We're going to talk today about hay barns, our experiences building them. But before we begin, I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering here at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky with my husband. We have a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering as well, where I focus on precision livestock farming. And I also farm myself in Mercer County, where we have registered Angus cattle and some goats.
Okay, Josh. So before we get started on the hay barns, let's talk about what's been happening on the farm this week.
Just been, still putting out some hay, definitely greening it up. Thinking about putting out some fertilizer this weekend if it's dry enough, potentially.
Okay.
And then also we've been still calving, so still getting a couple calves on the ground right now. I haven't really hit it full stride, I don't think yet. And then we also are still working on equipment. So a lot of equipment, trying to figure out. We did some troubleshooting, figured out, it's not our clutch, it's some other little issues. So that was a good. Potentially, we think it's that. So did some troubleshooting on some equipment, and still troubleshooting on our hay equipment.
Yeah, we have calves coming pretty heavy right now. We had probably another 5 since the last time we recorded. Sometimes one a day. We had one come last night. I went out and checked, and then went back out and checked again because it was a heifer. So we're 7 out of 10 on our heifers. We're getting close to the end on the heifers, which is good because the heifers definitely require a little bit more observation than the cows. The cows we want to be careful with as well, but the heifers in particular tend to have trouble more often than cows. Just not sure what they're doing.
Yep.
Don't always take the calves well. All of that. Just want to make sure calf gets up, is healthy, mom's up and healthy. All that happens. So that's our higher priority group right now.
Everybody's taking them.
Yeah, the heifers have been doing excellent this year.
Okay,
So that's
good.
really positive. And no real issues other than that one set of twins that we talked about last time. So
Okay.
which is what it is. It's unfortunate. So other than that, we're also working on equipment, getting things ready for hay season. We had fertilizer out last week.
Oh, doing pretty good. It's been so warm this
You
week.
can tell it greened up even just in the couple days because we were lucky. We put it out on Thursday last week. We had rain on Friday and Saturday last week. And it's been warm enough that you can actually see, like it's getting, the ground is taking it in. Which is positive. It's always your nervousness when you apply fertilizer that if we get rain right behind it, it could be enough rain to wash it.
Yep.
But fortunately, it started as a slower rain before it picked up into heavier rains, and so it seemed to have washed in before rather than away, which is optimistic because it's very expensive.
Yes.
You don't want to lose it. Aside from that, we're working on equipment, getting things ready for hay season, similar to you, just making sure everything is prepared.
Right. It takes time,
Yep.
Those things you have to do.
We're also finishing out barns, cleaning out barns, getting barns emptied. Typically, because we're going to talk about building a hay barn, but our hay barns are all hoop barns with gravel floors in them. So all the hay comes out. Typically, if we have hay that has lost string and has broken apart a little bit, there's some remnants of hay in there. We'll usually use a fork and try and get all of that organic matter out if we can.
Yep.
And then we will also run a leaf blower, a higher powered leaf blower through there just to push out some more hay that's in the barn. It's a lot of work, but because we sell the hay, trying to keep bottom bales from having too much organic matter and too much moisture in contact with them, it's important. Our bigger barn that we only feed ourselves and we feed all of those bales, we don't worry about quite as aggressively. We'll still pick up major amounts of hay, but we won't worry about blowing it out necessarily in the same way. But for those higher value hay barns where we're selling the hay, we'll spend a little extra time out. So that's one of the goals in the next couple weeks is to finish doing that. But as barns become empty, that's one of our tasks.
Okay. And how about the fencing project?
We have plenty of fencing projects. We have some that are currently being hired out, other ones that we're going to work on ourselves. We have our bulls in one lot. We need to finish the fence on the second lot. But that's part of a project we're hiring done because it needs to be done this spring. Includes some yard fence. Kids are terrors, is what they are, as you'd expect from any toddler in the 2 to 3 range. We just need a fence to make sure they don't make it to the road before we get there with them.
Something to slow them down.
Yeah, something that will slow them down enough for me to catch up, which is not always possible for me. So I'm getting too old. What's really the reality on the ground right now? So that's sort of where we're at. We're working on a couple different projects. We do have some other fence to do, but that fence is actually being hired out. And we're looking at some other perimeter fence that we need to get done and trying to decide if we're going to do it or hire it done just because of the speed at which it needs to be done being a road boundary.
Yep.
So we're figuring all that out right now.
Cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, it's definitely a cost benefit analysis. We like how we do fence. We found someone that we're happy with how they do fence. They're willing to do what we would prefer that they do and design the fence the way we would want it built. So we've got some final touches. We have some electric wire to run on the inside of some other fences and some other things to do. So balancing out how much time we have with how much work we have. Rick?
We are going to the fencing school next week.
Yeah, we have fencing schools in
Allen County?
In Allen County next Tuesday on the 11th, and then
Madison County.
in Madison County on the 13th. The Madison County one I'm pretty sure is sold out. Allen County might still have a spot or two left, but look like we're going to have 2 really good fencing schools. I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, yeah, it should be a pretty good day, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks.
2 days, I guess. 2 good days. You're right, Josh. Okay, so let's come back to the hay barn topic for today and talk a little bit about building hay barns and our experiences with that.
So I guess we had built one, like I said, recently in the past episodes. I talked about we built one November, December. And so we started in November, did some earth. First thing we had done was the earthwork, get it all leveled out, site preparation. We put it on the hill there. Next step we did was went in and marked our corners. So marked our corners, and I think we had, a post every 6 foot. I think we had one post that didn't have a rock in it. and so we luckily have access to a rock bit. And so that was definitely helpful. Well, we started out with an 8-inch bit, and then we eventually switched to a 12-inch bit. Hard one from labor.
Yeah.
And so that definitely helped us as far as getting a good hole diameter, put a 6x6 post in there, and we hit a rock on most all holes. So it just took some time. So that's something we had to plan for. Being on top of the hill, that's pretty much we were guaranteed.
Fine. Yeah, we have spots where we have a lot of rock and spots where we don't have any, and sometimes it's not where we expect that we hit the rock, but it is frustrating when you do end up on like a rock shelf or something, and you just every time you hit a post in the ground, it's hitting that solid sheet of rock. So I understand that. For us, we have 5 hoop barns for hay storage on our properties, and we've built 3 of the 5. And we've had the other 2 built just based on time allowances. I've been happier with the barns that we've built than the other ones, but the crews we've had build them have done a good job. They're all standing, which in light of the wind we've had the last few weeks is always a good sign. The thing I will say that I find challenging about building the barn is getting your posts really should be exactly 6 foot. Like that, getting them exactly at 6 foot in the ground and at the top is critical. Especially if your 6x6s are not completely square, or they try and fork, like they curve, they twist up a little bit. Getting them, the twist is a little bit less of a problem from a structural standpoint, but it's annoying when you go to try and set your brackets down to set the ribs for the hoop.
Yep.
So all of that can be a little bit challenging, a little bit frustrating at times. But to me, getting them that exactly 6 foot apart and level, so that they receive that rib structure the way they need to, can be the most challenging part. the build. That, or you were there the day that we managed to unroll our tarp the backwards. But we'll get to the tarp and getting the fabric up on the hoop barns. But getting all those posts squared away, making sure they're all in line at the bottom and at the top can be pretty challenging.
And it is frustrating too, because we actually had to get an additional jackhammer bit because we drilled a hole where it's supposed to be, but the post was just enough of an angle on some of them where I bought this post. But anyway, we had to get it.
Isn't that the worst? And you're never sure if you should take it back at that point, but it's too much work to take it back if it's just one or two. So.
And so we end up getting jackhammer and just jackhammer out, the bottom edge, wherever it needed to be jackhammer. And give ourselves a little bit extra room to get some concrete all the way. Try to put, for us, at least 2 bags of concrete. Just make sure we have a really good footing.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We put 2 bags in the bottom of each hole. We like that concrete to be down at least 2 feet down below the top of the soil surface and enough soil on top of it that if there was freeze-thaw events, trying to keep that concrete low enough that it doesn't heave during those events. So knowing your depth, your frost depth levels in an area is really important for that. I know some people won't worry so much about that, but anytime I've seen a hoop barn go with the post going as well as the ribs and the fabric, it's almost always a full concrete column all the way up to the surface or no concrete at all. Very rarely is it that proper footer at the base of the concrete and then soil on top that pulls all the way out of the ground like that. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're building one and you have the opportunity, keep the concrete low and then tamp dirt on top of it or reset the dirt on the very top. So.
Right, so just make more of a plug almost.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you're basically creating this collar around the base of that post, and then that can't pick up because the soil holds it down.
Right.
Gives the soil the ability to use all of its strength for you instead of against you, which is not always the case. So it's nice when you can take advantage of it.
It is, and we actually set ours. We got 10-foot posts, but I set them. If I could, I set the two in my every corner was down 4 foot.
Yeah.
I had at least 6. I had about 6 foot on.
Yeah, that was that's on our barns. We've typically aimed for at least 3.5 feet on the depth of our holes. That just tends to be the length of our auger. Yeah. That's what we can usually get. We have a 4-foot auger, but it's a narrower auger. So we like that wider bit, a little bit more space at the bottom of the hole to put that concrete into, which means we lean towards that 3.5 foot. What ends up happening, though, is that we end up cutting off 6 or 8 inches on the top of a lot of posts, and then 1 or 2 posts that sink really good.
Yep.
We get 4 foot of depth, and then we have that. But that's not a bad thing. I think that's a pretty common height, is to get to about 6 foot tall to the top of the posts on all of our sidewalls. The nice thing about that 6 foot height is that it gives you enough space to stack your hay in your barn once you add the rock back in.
Yep.
And so that's kind of important. That's one consideration if you've never built these barns, is to decide what that sidewall height is going to be, because the sidewall height will denote how much hay is actually going to fit in the barn. Because your first layer, you're potentially on a 32 foot wide hoop barn. You're looking for 6 bales across. Unless you have 5x6s, then I guess technically you could be looking at 5 bales across, right?
Yep, I go 5.
The 5x5s and the 4x5s, you can fit 6 across. So that's sort of the difference. But either way, 5 or 6 bales across, you want them all to fit, and then your next layer has to fit inside of it. So if you do a true pyramid, it'd be 5, 4, 3, or 6, 5, 4 on the 5x5s or the 4x5s, depending on your dimension on your bales. If you don't give yourself enough height on that sidewall, your hay starts to stick into the fabric and the hoops, and you don't want to be pulling hay in and out with a fork, because if you have to lift it up and you're already into the rib material, that metal, extruded metal there, you'll end up in trouble. damaging the structure.
Okay.
So making sure you have enough height that you're not actually touching the fabric or those ribs is.
Starts tearing stuff up.
Yep. That's something I try and avoid at all costs, especially when I invest that much money in a structure. So
Yeah.
So that height really is pretty important. That's why those 10-foot posts are really useful. Some people will try and do it with 8-foot posts. 8-foot posts make me nervous because you definitely want 3 foot in the ground that only gives you 5 foot. And by the time you level off those posts and you trim up the edges to get them all even, you're closer to 4.5 foot of height, and that's really not enough, especially if you're doing a 5x5 bale, or a full 5x5 or a full 4x5. And if you're doing the 5x6, it's absolutely
not enough. Yeah,
inadequate. So it's a little bit tricky. You're one of those people that runs your 4x5 baler or your 5x5 baler instead of running it all the way out to 60 inches, you're running it at like 56 inches. You might get away with a shorter post, but then you're limited on what you can bring into the barn too.
And there are some, because there are some options. I think ours took 32 by 72 took 26 posts.
Yep.
And so there are some where you can get a post spacing maybe every 10 foot. There are some where you have a reduced number. So if a rock is going to be huge, you can possibly get a more resilient truss structure.
Yep.
And put them every 10 foot.
Yeah. But it also, not only does that make the truss structure have to be a little bit more robust, but it also means that our members that we're running across the top, where we typically will run 2x6s, at least on our barns, that's what we've run as our wood members across the top of the posts and along the outside. We might have to move to 2x8s or 2x10s to get that same structural stability on those long runs.
So that is something you just have to consider.
Absolutely, yeah. It's absolutely a consideration, and pricing out different styles of hoop barns and different companies that produce them, you might come up with a different answer depending.
I can tell you for a fact, you definitely come up with different.
Yeah. I will also say that now that I have a bunch of hoop barns, we're going to talk about the fabric next, because I think this is sort of an interesting discussion. How you feel about the fabric, how I feel about the fabric, about pulling the fabric, that can be exciting in and of itself.
Yep.
And then how you attach the fabric back to the structure.
And so, for the fabric, one of the first ones we built, we actually, pulled it over the barn. So it was all of us with like one small 50 horsepower tractor, and everybody grabbed a rope. We used ropes and then pulled it over, and it was attached just with rope all the way down. So we had to pretty much go a lattice on both sides all the way down.
A lot of lacing.
And then pull that as tight, pretty much the instructor would pretty much pull as tight as you could.
Mm-hmm.
And then use that method. And then we had to adjust each end. It was the same way on each end. You had a little lattice tied at the top, and you had to use that lattice work and take you all the way down this structure. And so while it worked, I didn't think that it was the best methodology. Definitely, probably same as you, maybe preferential towards the ratchet strap kind.
Yeah, I think that most companies have moved towards ratchet straps, so they have ratchet straps on each post to pull the fabric down on both sides of the building, and then also along that arch on the end, they now have ratchets in most cases about every 18 inches or so, all the way along that whole hoop. And that way you can ratchet in each one individually and sort of pull that structure square, the fabric square. The other benefit is when you're trying to pull tension, if you're trying to pull it on that hoop, which we've done before, you want to work from the center down. Not work from one side all the way across. That means you're only pulling tension over half of it. So get the center all lined up, tied back, and then work each side down individually. But even that is a tremendous amount of work. And with those heights, unless you have like a cherry picker or something that's pretty adjustable on height, you end up moving yourself up and down, up and down, up and down, going back and forth, trying to pull that extra material out of that lattice.
And the thing about that is it's almost a two-man job, because you need somebody, if you're doing it tractor or anything else, you need somebody in the tractor, you need yourself up in the bucket or whatever it is, somebody in the bucket doing that. You really need to have, I did these 3, then you can move again. And it's really, it takes some time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I personally have really appreciated the movement towards ratchets rather than doing lacing all the way on the sides and along the hoop. that the lacing is just a tremendous amount of work. Plus, the fabric in the tarp itself, that material stretches.
Yep.
And so each year we come in and just check tension on all of our hoop structures. It's very quick to go through and add a click or two on each barn. Versus if we had to pull out that extra material, we would be less likely to do it. And for the life of the structure, having it not loose and flapping tremendously helps extend that life on that structure. So we're protecting our structure by doing the annual maintenance, by keeping all that tension on it. And so that is really important to keep. I have white hoops. I know there are a lot of different colors of hoop material out there. And I will say this, the white hoop, because it allows some sunlight through, it's not completely opaque. We do get a little sun discoloration on our top bales. They're not green like they were when they went into the barn. But I can see my hay pretty well. If people come to purchase hay, they can see the hay fairly well, as long as it's not a super cloudy day or at night. And so I personally like those white hoops just because they allow more light into space. But I know some people prefer those darker hoops for the sun protection that they provide.
I like to be able to see. And so if I'm pulling out at night, even kind of towards dusk is when we get home. So having that a little bit of additional light, a little bit of additional visibility, I think is for us, at least.
Yeah, I would agree. So for us, that's been our preference too, has been to stay with white hoops. But that's a personal preference, I think, for sure. Some people definitely, stylistically, if you have all green barns, they might want a green tarp, green fabric, so that kind of matches the style of other buildings on their site.
And something we didn't mention, so we talked about the fabric, but also the hoops. So the hoops that we put up, you have to put them together usually in 3 sections, but the first 2 hoops are probably the most important ones when you're putting them up.
Yeah, that's true. Getting the I call them the ribs on the structure, yeah, but the metal metal ribs or the metal hoop itself is pretty critical. And the first 2, not only do you have to get them both up and have them stand up long enough to get them all attached, which the first time Josh and I built one together, we lost one in the wind.
Yep.
And it was very messy. We did resolve the issue finally. We got it fixed, but we ended up having to tie back and hold pressure on our newest. Every rib that went up, we held back until we got it all mounted and painted. And once those first 2 are tied to each other, they seem to be fairly stable. And that's really an important feature to get right. And then not only do you have to put some slip collars in there to hold those 2 at the right distance, but you actually have some mounting brackets as well to make it a more rigid structure.
So once you get that first 2 in, not bad. But that first one, you have to really almost be fast and be dedicated to putting up those first 2.
Yeah, and the one thing you want to be careful is when you pick up that second one that you don't end up hitting the first one in the process, which I've never done, but I could see how you could fairly easily do that, and that would not be ideal stretch.
So similar to what you said, that first one we do put up there, or we have it up, we'll have 2 ropes tied to it. So we put tension on both sides, keep it relatively centered for the most part. And then we come in there with the second one, we have another rope on that one, just so we can hold it hopefully steady.
Yeah, one of the things that we found that helped us when building them is that those first 2 hoops, I said before, they have like a metal piece that slides in between the 2 that comes on each hoop, but then it also has some brackets that screw in and mount on both of the first 2 ribs. And we marked out where those were before we put them up, the Sharpie on the inside of the hoop. And that allowed us, when we wanted to put that bracket in, to immediately put it up there, tap some self-tapping metal screws in, and get it up there much more quickly than if we had to visually assign a midpoint between other materials, I guess.
Right. And then another thing, we have to do when you do have it up there. So it's probably a 3-man crew at least, because you have to have one person up there kind of holding and putting stuff together. Another person probably driving the tractor and doing some other things, but also, one at the sides.
Yeah.
pretty much putting lags in to slide the pipe,
the foot, yeah.
the foot on.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely at least a 3-man job. In my opinion, we've done it with 3 and 4. 4 works much better than 3.
You could have one person on
each side, screwing the lags into the wood structure. So there is a lot of work that goes into building one. I will also say though that I've been happy because when we built them ourselves, we were able to really be careful to make sure that we assign the right as much height as we could out of our posts, get ourselves as much height as we could. We were able to get all of our ribs squared up the way we wanted them, and they are really well balanced. Like they are where we want them to be. And we were able to pull the tarp on days that I wanted to pull the tarp and not on days that I didn't want to pull the tarp. Because pulling the tarp is a lot of work. Some people will pull it with a tractor or something like that. I've always pulled them by hand with multiple people. You want to be careful because if it's really windy, that can be...
Yes, and we've done the bad day using equipment. It just makes for a stressful situation.
Yeah, because if you're pulling it with like a tractor, it's not like you're going to lose the tarp, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get it up there square.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean you're not going to hurt someone else that's holding a rope at a different end other than the tractor, because the tractor's not going to move, not going to give and take as that wind blows. It's better not to lose the tarp altogether, but at the same time, that's not an ideal scenario.
And, and sometimes you got to watch out for, because when you're pulling it up, sometimes you have like a snag, depending on what you had.
Yep.
I guess sometimes it can snag and you need to stop and fix things as they happen.
Yeah, because there could be a burr on that metal. And the last thing you'd want to do is rip your fabric while pulling it before you even put a bale of hay into your barn. That would irritate the heck out of me, I'm sure. So I would be very upset if that happened. So yeah, that is a good point, that you have a little bit more time to figure out what's happening and to make sure you work through any snags on ends.
We get it pulled over and then square it up, and we typically just, I don't know how it's been done. We've thought about it in other steps, putting in after we put the posts, and we usually put our rock in last, even though the hoop's already up at that point. I was like, we usually put it in last just because I want everything else to be. I don't know why. We should probably put it after we get the post set. Then would be an ideal time, because if you have anything above you to block you, and they can just come in there and dump on the tarp. But maybe a little quicker. We usually wait till the end and we put it in.
We've actually done it at the end as well, which is an interesting point. I've never actually thought about putting in the rock before I put up the hoops and the fabric. But that's a good point, that you could very easily do it in the other order. The key is, if you're going to do it, make sure you get that rock in and sort of settled, because you're going to be turning on it when you pick the tractor to lift a person or whatever piece of equipment you to lift people up to the top. And you don't want to tear, especially if you put filter fabric and then rock, which is what we've always done.
Oh, yeah.
I will say that because there's not as much water inside the structure, I don't know if the filter fabric is as critical as it would be with an external heavy use area. But I personally would prefer to always use that filter fabric and keep that organic matter out of my rock.
Yep.
And to protect that boundary between those two materials. So that's what we've always done. And that's always worked well. We've never had a hoop barn eat rock. We lose rock, but I know we lose rock through tires on the tractor and things like that, not necessarily, or on the hay, when you pick up a bale of hay and you can see some rock sticking to it. So I know that's where we're losing the rock. I don't think we're losing it into the ground underneath the barn. And so we would tend to lean towards putting down the filter fabric and rock, but I would be hesitant to do it if I couldn't compact it a little bit before I started doing those turns and putting up those ribs.
Okay. And we, like I said, typically done at the last, but we thought, sometimes that, we could have done this at a sooner step, but usually we were limited by rain or other events.
Yep.
Get the rock. Usually get the hoop up, then get the fabric, throw it down, wait for the rock truck.
Yep.
We had a good day. So
I think that's fair. I think that's a pretty good summary of building them. What would you say is your least favorite step in the whole process of building?
For me, it's putting the posts in the ground. Those first 4 posts, other ones, I don't mind as much. Wouldn't mind as much if it was actual soil, not rock underneath it. But it's just putting this. Once you put like the 26 some odd posts in the ground, then after that we feel like we're on the home stretch.
Yeah, I would agree. Once you get through getting the wood portion of the structure, the knee walls up, it feels like it goes fairly quickly.
Yes.
I too have frustration with getting everything squared up the way I want it, and I also have frustration with specifically getting those first 2 ribs up. It gives me high levels of anxiety because I'm usually the person that is up in the air doing that, and there is a time crunch. People are definitely anxious about it, and they're yelling at you to get done faster if you're the person in the air, because they want those first 2 up and secured to each other, because that's what really gives stability to that structure. And as the person in the air, you are under a high level of pressure
and
to get it done quickly. Yeah. And so that for me is a very anxiety-inducing part of the I know Josh is not the person that's up in the air, so he doesn't ever. He's the one yelling from the ground. Hurry up!
Trying to be understanding though.
Trying to show empathy there. That's right, Josh. Something we're both known for is our empathy. Okay, I think that's a pretty good summary of building a hoop barn. Not the most stressful thing that I've ever done on the farm. It doesn't even come close to working cattle. If you need some encouragement to build one, we have a really nice extension pub about this. We have a lot of pictures. We have built quite a few, Josh and I. So
yes,
we'd be happy to chat with someone if they're really interested in doing that themselves. But just as a word of encouragement, this is not the most frustrating process that we've ever done on the farm.
It's not nearly as bad as fencing. It's a lot more posts.
Yeah, that's right. It's not as bad as fencing either. So there you go. And we successfully do that every year, don't we, Josh?
Yes.
So with that, let's go ahead and just give everyone a quick update on what we're hoping to get done on the farm this coming week.
So this weekend, still going to be more equipment repair. So we're just putting out hay, hopefully moving cows here in the next couple of weeks, the grass pastures, but, moving hay, still cleaning up some fence lines, and also just run on equipment.
Yeah, I think we may get a little more hay out this weekend. I'm anticipating that as of the next time we record a podcast, we will be on grass on most of our farms. Because most of our animals have decided that they do not want to eat hay anymore. In fact, on our leased piece of land this past week, they decided that they would go through a fence into not another field with grass, but just into the trees and eat the trees instead of eating the hay in front of them.
Huh.
An area that we normally don't worry too much about them going to because there's no grass there for them to get, but they went through the hot wire to get to tree leaves. I'm not sure what to say about that. If they eat the hedge apples, it won't hurt my feelings. Unless they choke on them, then I'll be very upset with them. But
we tell most of ours, like, you eat the hay. Bale the hay, you're going to eat the This is the time of year where it's like we get the tough love.
Yeah, we're sort of in that tough love period too. But I'm guessing by about next week is when we'll have, if the weather stays as warm as it has been, we'll have enough grass to start a rotation probably next week or next weekend. So we're getting close to that point. I don't know where you feel you're at.
Oh, there's definitely, I have at least one farm that's completely ready to go. We just probably turn them in there and flash grade. Like they could hit it hard and pull them off and probably fertilize.
Yeah.
So, we're going to see. We have a couple fields where I feel comfortable putting them out there. But right now, I just want to eat that.
Yeah.
It's just kind of not to take down the supply from this past year, take it down to a manageable level, and then I'll have that observed. For maybe hundreds of my bales going into.
Yeah, we have one hoop barn that is still full,
Yep.
but we will try to empty all of our other barns, which is not bad. We actually had a pretty robust supply last year. With the drought, we were nervous about being short on hay. We'll probably clear the other 4 barns completely, and also the hay that we had tarped gone. So all of that's fairly promising. We still have some calves in the barn. There are calves that we weaned from our fall group that we'll carry through on hay until sometime in May, probably, and then sell them. Unless the market looks so good that we can't justify holding them any longer, we'll hold them for a few more weeks. Because we'll make decisions based upon how they do first 45 days after weaning. Decide which heifers to keep and which steers we want to feed out. So.
Okay.
So that we've got another source to not sell, but to dispose of a few more bales of hay there, as well as a few bales of hay for our steers that we're finishing.
Okay. Another way to feed that hay out, and we'll have plenty of reserve out of the barn.
Yeah, plus bulls. Bulls always keep eating. They won't go in until June, so they'll be on hay for quite a while here. Don't know about your bulls, but ours go through a decent amount of hay. So
Go through a decent amount of hay, but we typically should be selling a couple of them here.
That's probably going to help your bottom line if you can sell a couple bulls. They're hard to come by this year. That's one thing I will say. We bought bulls a few weeks ago, and there were some out there, but we specifically wanted some terminal things, and we were struggling to find the right animal.
Okay. I know. Well, I guess it's probably because a lot of the herds, I think we're kind of downsized past couple of years, so it's definitely that probably put some strains in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that probably was a pretty big component of it. Is just people that have shrunk their cow herds just have less bulls that they're selling. Yeah, the market's been a little bit. I don't want to say it's good because the inputs to raising cattle are also up quite a bit. But the prices have been up, and so for people that are looking to sell out cow herds, it's been an okay market for culling.
Yes.
So, okay, I think with that, we'll end the podcast for today, and we will come back next week. We'll try and do one of our podcasts next week from a fencing school, so we'll give sort of an update on how fencing schools are going.
Bye, take care.
See you next week.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.